And I still sound good, right?
What was that?
I still sound good, right?
Yeah, you're good.
Cool.
George, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, bud. Well, I think we had a 20-minute show before the show.
That all should have been on it, actually removing some of the names that we mentioned, but the rest of it could have been on the episode for sure.
That's why we didn't record it. But in certain conversations, I don't have the foresight to remove the name. So it's better we didn't record.
Dude, but I love that we're having this conversation now, because we're going to talk about relationships and we'll get into the why. But I think us connecting now with the person who introduced us versus the person who introduced us years ago, and as to why it stuck this time and not that time. And I'm not shitting on anybody by saying this, but what I'm saying is the power of a true relationship will create other true relationships and other true connections versus fake relationships where people are trying to use one another, et cetera. And so Brian Bogert introduced us the second time around. And obviously everybody knows how much I love Brian, and they'll find out how much you love Brian. But why don't we take a second, man, and tell people who you are today, and then we're going to break down how you got there.
For sure. And I feel to God, like I can't give, hey, Brian, if you're listening, I can't give your ego any more love, bro. I love you too much to like sit here and like edify you. I love you. You're my boy. Brian's an incredible human being and we do a lot together. He's awesome. But yeah, I'll give everybody the shorter version and then you can dig into what we want, right? So I became an entrepreneur by accident and I'm only successful because I'm stupid. That's the easiest way to describe it, right? So I grew up in poverty, drug abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. So I did the next best thing. I forged my parents' signature, joined the Marine Corps and ran away. Go from one trauma to another. And then I ended up in this organization that for 13 years of my life rewarded me for having trauma and then used it to turn me into a weapon. It was great. Then after 13 years, they're like, hey, you've been blown up one too many times, one too many injuries. We're kicking you out. And I was like, retiring me? They're like, no, we're separating you. It's been fun. 13 years, you're out the door. Nothing. Cool. Shit. Fuck. Cool. Yeah. Well, luckily in Afghanistan in 2010, I started CrossFitting, which led me to paleo, which led me to Rob Wolf's book, which led me to understanding that if I changed the way that I ate, I could heal my eating disorders and my body image issues and my hormone imbalances and things like that. But I'd never cooked before. So when I came home from Afghanistan, I wanted to win. And so I said, I need to learn how to cook, but I need accountability. So I started a Facebook page. I made a fake email because I didn't go to college and I couldn't get a Facebook account yet. So I made a fake email. Oh yeah. Old like school, we're going back, bro, like back. Made a fake EDU email, got a Facebook account, and I decided I would just make a recipe a day and I would post about what I learned and what I can do. And then I was like, boom, and I would just post what I learned and boom. And then after 3 months, someone's like, can you save these somewhere? So I saved them in the notes section on Facebook. Wow. And then someone's like, hey, bro, the notes are hard. You should start a blog. I'm like, what the hell's a blog? This is 2009, by the way, 2009, 2010. What's a blog? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, go to blogger.com. And I went and I was like, oh, it's like a website. Cool. All right, cool. So I moved everything from Facebook notes to blogger.com. And I will never forget the URL. Civilized Caveman Cooking Creations.blogspot.com.
That's a mouthful.
Now, why I coach people, I coach them to not do what I ever did. Right. So that started and it was just a thing. I was like, every day I'm going to do it. And I had one rule. If anybody commented or anybody emailed me, I had to respond to everyone. And the moment I couldn't, I had to stop. And so I just kept going. And 6 months later, the military medically separated me. And someone was like, hey, man, you need to make these into an ebook. And I'm like, what's an ebook? And they're like, well, you put all the recipes in a book. And so I saved them all into an ebook and I emailed it to them for free. And they're like, we wanted to pay you. And I'm like, why would you pay me? They're free on my website. And they're like, because you conveniently put them together in one place for me, upload it to this website called ClickBank and charge $27. And so here's why I know I'm successful, because I'm stupid. All I did was exactly what my audience asked. And my first ever digital product made $1 million.
Wow.
And after that, the sky was the limit. So I became this food blogger and one of the biggest paleo sites that existed, launched an app, hit #1 in the world, wrote a book, became a 22-week New York Times bestseller, had millions of fans, and then went to the jungle, came back and realized I hated cooking. I didn't want to be an influencer and I had closed that chapter of my life. And so I gave the company away as a Christmas present and I didn't really know what to do. My wife was 8 months pregnant. We were about 3 weeks away from bankruptcy because I was running from my addictions and my pain and I was burying it in the business. Yeah. And so I was losing 40 grand a month with all those titles and all those labels and eventually caught up to me. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened though, because I ended up in a room full of my peers, those of which every one of you know, but out of respect for that room, I won't say their names. And I was lost, and I told them I was lost. And a few of them asked me for help. I answered some questions, and of the 22 people in the room, 20 of them hired me. And I didn't even know. I just told them to pay me what they wanted. And over the next couple of months, I doubled or tripled most of their businesses. And they were like, teach us what you did, because what you did isn't normal. And so I started realizing that my gift wasn't in doing it for myself. It was in helping other people do it and moving behind the curtain. And so then I dedicated the next 3 years. I had no social media, no website, and no email. And I just hid, and I was word of mouth only. I was literally like a speakeasy. If you wanted help, you had to know somebody that had my number, or you had to meet me. And that became my job. So then I ended up going behind the scenes of Vital and Onnit and Aubrey and Jim and all these big ass companies and people. And people started to notice. I was doubling companies, tripling companies. I took 2 to 1 billion. I took some from 1 million a month to 2 million a day in 2 years. And it was all through the power of relationships and the models that I had created. And so you fast forward to now, I did all of that, had all the success. And my wife's like, hey, you need to go back on the internet because you're talking a little too much at home. You need an outlet. And quite frankly, babe, you have a soft spot in your heart. You need to go help people where nobody helped you. You can't let people get gaslit and stole from. Like, you have the ability to do this. And I was like, cool. So I basically set out to make it my mission to empower entrepreneurs to use our relationship models to literally ethically build and scale their business, their bottom line, love their life, and accomplish anything they want. And now that's all I do. My podcast, events, everything. It's just of service as much as possible. And that gets us to today.
Whoa. Yeah. No, dude. And you framed it perfectly. And, the idea of just kind of just putting together something you're passionate about and then listening to what people want and doing it. That's a part that people miss all the time. Like I coach people in their branding and podcasting all the time. And I go, what does your audience want? And they always go, well, my audience isn't huge. I go, great. Well, if you have 35 people, what do the 35 people want? Like, they're afraid to ask. It's like this really, really weird thing, but it's so common sense to me. And it's really, really bizarre. And for you to go make $1 million is, off of the first ebook at $27 a piece, that's dreams, right? That's what people dream about.
Can I give some context? I only had 800 fans on Facebook, and I had 600 emails on my email list.
Wow.
And when I launched my book and became a 22-week New York Times bestseller, I sold 175,000 copies of a paleo print cookbook. That is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
My email list was 6,000 people. And so I want everybody to understand, because it's such a valid point, right? And it is common sense, but there's also this broken paradigm that exists in our industry that, like, you have to, it's almost like the Marine Corps, like, you have to lead from the front and you have to be better and you can't have feelings and you can't have whatever. And I was like, well, this is where the movie Field of Dreams lied to you, because Field of Dreams is bullshit. If you build it, they don't come, because you're building something you think that they want, rather than, as you just alluded to, asking, co-creating, and allowing them to be a part of the process, which creates endowment and loyalty to where they can actually never ever leave, even when they become your clients and your customers, and moving it forward. And 0-point data, i.e. talking to the people that are paying you attention, is literally one of the easiest ways to find revenue and information and feedback and all the parts and pieces that are required. But the truth is that the reason most people struggle is because it requires being seen. Like, it requires a level of humility and vulnerability. Like, for me to be like, hey man, do you have any thoughts? Like, this morning, I'm working on my messaging because I have a very diverse crowd of people. I help 5-figure entrepreneurs, 4-figure entrepreneurs, 6 figures, 7 figures. And then most of my private clients are all 20 million and up, and some up in the $1 billion range, right? And it's kind of hard to synthesize that into a statement of like, I help 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs ethically build their business. And so I'm no different. I opened my phone this morning and I texted 20 of the smartest people I knew and said, hey, I need help. I'm trying to synthesize this down so it makes sense, and I'm getting stuck. Can you all give me feedback? And like, these are people that I respect and admire. And I even reached out to some of my clients that pay me money to ask them for their feedback on how I can be better. And my heart was so full because they all start responding. No, you need this, you need this. It's here, it's boom. And all that does is deepen our connection and deepen our relationship. So I love that. But I wanted to give some context, because the reason I say I'm successful because I was stupid is, like, I never watched a video. I never read a book. I never went to college. So basically my whole instinct was like survival. And it's like, okay, cool. I can only do what moves the needle, and anything that doesn't cannot be in. And so I went straight to the source every single day. Well, what do you want? And I would even run my social the same way. Like, hey, I have all weekend to make some recipes. What's a recipe you've been missing that you'd love to have? Boom, paleo banana bread. Got repinned over 1.9 billion times.
Jesus.
Pinterest called me and flew me and my wife to San Francisco to meet with the founders to explain them what I was doing. And I was like, you guys are going to be really disappointed that you paid all this money for me to get here. I asked everybody what they wanted, and then I gave it to them. And then I made sure every one of them knew that I gave it to them.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
dude.
so,
And
yeah,
dude, there's so many places, and I'm cutting you off because there's already so many avenues we can go down with this conversation.
You should.
The idea of asking people for help, right? That's a vulnerable moment. And I use a program called Trello. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I learned about Trello. So one of my businesses, I own a podcast production and coaching company.
Yep.
So I work with a guy out overseas who has a team. I only really talk to the guy. And I'm like, how do I keep communicating with you? I'm a little lost with how we can really grow and scale this thing. And he goes, I'm going to set you up with Trello. Now, keep in mind, this is somebody that I'm paying, compared to American dollars, not a lot of money. Now it's great for him, and I'm taking care of him and his family, but he's the one who introduced me, because I went, I don't know what to do. And now how many people in that position are afraid to go, I don't know, what do you know anything? Right now, he's worked with other people. He's like, this is what I use. This is what I learned. It's super easy. And I jumped in, and we still use it to this day, years later. And so I think asking anybody, like you said, you texted the 100 smartest people you know, but you can text 100 other people that maybe know one thing, but it happens to be the one thing, right?
Yep. And I
now,
think, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to influx your point. Keep going.
But where I wanted to really go with that is the idea of vulnerability isn't necessarily matched up with this guy who was a Marine for 13 years. When did that change for you? When did that really become your thing?
Yeah, man. It became my thing the first day I didn't want to kill myself anymore, which was on the backside of some hard truth. Like, to quantify this, in the last 10 years, I've easily spent over $1.5 million on therapy, modalities, retreats, silent retreats, plant medicine. I mean, everything, stem cells, like you name it. I've done all of it. And all of it led me to this point. But the number one thing that always has helped is the moment I'm truly authentic with who I am. Like, Radical Honesty is an incredible book. And it took me a long time to gain the confidence, because I was afraid people were going to leave, or they were going to judge me, or they were going to blank. But I'm a guy who likes really big circumstances. I love really big stakes. And so I started my food blog because I was bulimic, and I was hiding it from everybody, because I knew as a top performer that the easiest place to hide was in plain sight. Right. And so I was always the most fit guy, the fastest guy, the strongest guy. And then when you weren't looking, I was sticking my finger in my throat. And that went on for almost 16 years, including in Afghanistan. And so when I started that blog, what ended up happening is people started loving me and supporting me, regardless of what I looked like, regardless of how I felt. And it got to a point, and I was in Austin, Texas, about to keynote the biggest event I'd ever keynoted. And I remember my talk so well. And it was the 3 ways to use food to create breakthrough results in your life. And my wife looked at me and said, are you really going to go up there and lie again? And I knew exactly what she meant. And it ripped me to pieces. And so I made a decision in that day that I wanted to be different. So I walked out on stage, and instead of giving my keynote, I started with, I've been lying to all of you. A lot of you look at me as the New York Times bestseller, the #1 app, but none of you know why. And I'm like, the truth is that I hide behind my blog because I was sexually abused twice, and I've been bulimic and struggling with body dysmorphia. And that's why I do what I do. And I've been afraid to tell all of you. And so I gave that keynote, and I was drenched. I have the video. I was drenched in sweat from the neck down, and I had every fear, but nobody left. Everybody sat down. They came up and acknowledged me after. And then my buddy Abel James and Stephanie Rupert had 2 of the biggest health podcasts at the time. So that day we went and recorded an episode for both. And the next day we told probably 4 or 5 million people my story. And so that moment felt so freeing and so light. And yeah, there was fallout, but for me, I felt like I could fly. And it was in that moment that created the momentum and the shift. And then I realized that the more authentic I was and the more vulnerable I was, the more everything else started to work in my life. The more clients paid me, the more they trusted me, the more people implemented what I said because they trusted me and we had a relationship. And I realized that my job is to lead, not to follow. And you can't expect, or I can't expect somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And so it kind of became my mission and my ethos. And that's when I built my brand around a lighthouse. And I was like, my favorite quote that I have for my lighthouse and the students I give is that a lighthouse gives light because giving light is its nature. It's not concerned with who gets it. And it's like, for me now, with a child, with 2 children and a family, like I really focus on legacy, and I want my kids to be proud of me and not ashamed or me to have shame, but like, this is my story. This is my life. These are the mistakes I made. This is how I feel. And this is what I'm doing it. And it just so happened that I had enough courage to bring it into a container that scared the shit out of me, like including entrepreneurs, some of the biggest rooms. Like if I started, actually some people behind you on the wall, to be really frank with you, I'm seeing like 3 of them. And
I'm trying to figure out where your eyes are going.
They've met me and they've met me and they've hung out with me, and everyone's like, so how'd you get here? And I don't go with like, oh, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, well, I was a sex and love addict. I was an addict. I attempted my life, and boom, 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 boom. And I don't do it to like love bomb them or truth bomb them, but it's like, this is really who I am. And it was in that moment and collectively over the years that the momentum kind of carried. And then I started getting rewarded for it gratefully, because other people like you inspired me to share my truth for the first time. Like, I've never told anybody this, or I picked up the phone and called that customer, and we didn't know that our number 1 customer had been buying our products to treat their cancer for 6 years. And we didn't even think about it until you told us to call him.
Wow.
And I was like, and then that started to just really like permeate to me, to where I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do every day. Like, to help people put the human back in everything that we do. And so that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the human aspect is, especially even now, like you talk about this is a different conversation 2.5 years ago, but the human part of life has been stripped further and further and further away. And so to be super aware and make that our first priority, to make this a human interaction, right? I don't sell anybody anything. Like, I'm very much like you, right? I don't sell anybody anything. As a matter of fact, I get to the conversation with people where they're like, how can I pay you something for something? Yep. Right. And that's the beginning of a relationship, but it starts with vulnerability. Like Ed Milet cried on my show, and people are like, how do you get people like Ed to cry on your show? And I go, well, I shared with him first. And when you share, people are free to share back. And then that begins a relationship. Whatever the outcome may be, will be like, but you can't have any of that in mind right now. I want to talk about that. So I want to talk about you building these high level relationships, and business happens because of it. But I imagine that's never your reason, right?
No,
let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's a byproduct, right? Like, I actually, I'm going to answer what I told you before the show. I wanted to hit something. So I think one of the biggest problems, I'm going to answer this question with a statement and then an answer. One of the biggest challenges I see in our current paradigm is this level of transaction, right? It's all about like, get the lead, get the attention, get the email, get the credit card, get the sale. Yeah. And I'm like, totally fine. And I was like, so I ask my students, I ask my clients, I'm like, what are you monetizing? And they always say the same thing: money, money, money. And I was like, well, that's why you lose the game. I was like, because it's not, monetization is not just money. I'm like, it's attention, it's clout, it's referrals, it's relationships, it's depth of relationships, it's word of mouth. And it's like, I have many people, like I have some people that are still in my Facebook group today that followed me as a food blogger in 2011 that have always wanted to launch their business, and they're still going and still pushing. And I've basically given all of them my courses for free to help them. And most people would be like, you're nuts. Minus the fact that each of them has probably brought me $100,000 in revenue, because they can't stop talking about me and how much I've helped, even when everybody else has quit. And it takes me 2 minutes to be like, no, I got you. Or here's a video, or here's a resource, or thanks for supporting me for 8 years. And so for me, all I focus on is the depth of the relationship. And there's a lot of relationships that I pour into that don't come to fruition because they're not a relationship for me. Like, I'm not their cup of tea, and that's completely okay. And so it's really easy though, because I'm never thinking about like, how can I meet this person, or how can I do this? And even some of my friends get mad. They're like, I want to introduce you to so-and-so. I'm like, why? They're like, well, you should know them. And I was like, but what value can I bring to their life? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm not interested in hoarding potential, because that takes from me and it also takes from them. And it's disrespectful. Like, yeah, I get they're a celebrity and I get they're cool. But the thing that pisses me off the most, if you, hey, you got to meet my friend George, who has no reason to meet you because he thinks you're a celebrity. I was like, no, that just dehumanizes the whole situation.
Yep.
I was like, but if there's something I can help him with, or there's a good conversation, or if he's doing something for vets and he wants this, then I'm in. And so what's really interesting is that I have zero agenda except getting to know you and figuring out in that opportunity how I can best serve and support you. And quite frankly, it just seems like the easiest game to play, because no matter what ends up happening, it's like, hey, you should meet my friend blank and they want you to blank. And I told them about blank and they need to have blank and you should have them on blank. And I was like, and most of the time, like I look at my phone, and I'm like, where are all these messages coming from? I haven't talked to these people in like 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. But when there's truly no agenda outside of me getting to know you, right? Like knowing where you live, where your event is, how you're pouring in, how many people, like what's funny about you is 2 years from now, we're going to have a conversation like, yeah, but remember you had those tickets from 2020 at 130. Like I'm going to remember that.
Right.
Because that's important to me, right? Just like when I meet people, I always ask him a question. Jim Quick taught me this because he's an incredible human. But I try to ask questions about their life, about something like, what's your dog's name or how many kids do you have? And then when I see them again, I'm like, Justin, how was that event, bro? That location looked dope. And you tell me, and it just deepens this relationship. And so my job, in my opinion, is to create a community in my Truman Show, right? The Truman Show being the world that I live in. My job is to get people into my world, but not dictate how they act inside of it. That's it. Yeah. My only job is to get you into my world. You can have a house in my metaverse free of charge. My only ask is that you help your neighbors and then you text me back occasionally. But other than that, nothing's going to happen. But then if I bump into you at the coffee shop and you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. If your friend's doing an event at the library and you're like, oh, I need a speaker, tell them about me. And so I take the same principles with my friends, my acquaintances, but also with my customers, because the thing that we see right now is everybody's trying so hard to convince somebody that right now is the right time to give them the right credit card for the right moment. Who the fuck are you to tell me when I'm ready?
Yep.
Right? Like try that in person and I'm going to run you over like a bulldozer. It would never happen. And so don't try it online either. And it just so happens, Justin, that one of the best quote unquote conversion tactics that I have is like, when I get like, I have a sales call after this woman's like out of nowhere. This happened yesterday. I've been listening to your podcast. Somebody told me about you. I've been stalking you. I need a connection call because I want to pay you money. I got that DM yesterday and I was like, cool, here's when I'm open. She's like, done. What she doesn't realize is that when she said that to me, my brain went, I'm not going to let this woman pay me at all. Right? Because she thinks I'm her solution. So I'm going to get on a call in the first minute. I'm going to tell her, hey, you're not allowed to pay me, but we have 30 minutes. So what's your pain point? What's your struggle? And then I'm going to give everything in my power resourcefully to help her. And then if it goes and it implements and she comes back, then it's the right fit. Right. And so I take Maya Angelou's, people remember how you make them feel. And then I stack on, if we're given attention, our only job is to improve upon the silence, whether there's a transaction or not. And that's kind of how I go into everything. And so like, if you ask my friends, which makes me uncomfortable to this day, I was at a dinner in Austin, like massive entrepreneurs, and my wife was in town with me, and they all started having a couple drinks and laughing about how annoying I was. And I was like, oh, okay, give me a glass of wine, give it to me, right? And they start letting me have it. And they're like, do you want to know why you're fucking annoying? Because you make us feel so bad, because every time you introduce us to somebody or we call you, you always add value, you always give first, you never ask for anything. So we talk behind your back about how we can help you. And then we try, and then you turn it around on us and help us. And it's frustrating. It's so fucking annoying. And I was like, perfect. And so that's kind of how I go about it, is that for me, like Gary Vee's been saying this for years, and I love him for this. It's like, you're going to die. The end. Yeah. The end. And nowhere have I ever been around somebody posthumously and they were literally people like, well, I wish they had more money in the bank account, or he did this thing with work more. It's always about the person, the people, the impact, and the connection. And I found that if you're willing, because it's fucking lonely, to bring that into business and be willing to be a lighthouse, and stay consistent and congruent, that your results are almost unfathomable and untouchable, but they're not determined on your terms. You can't control it. You have to surrender to the input. And then you have to keep pouring and pouring and pouring, knowing and having faith or belief that that ripple is going to have an effect. And the reason I picked the lighthouse is the longest standing lighthouse has been running since 874.
Wow.
That's almost 1,200 years, and it's only been turned off twice.
That's
and it
crazy.
was turned off to go from whale blubber to kerosene and kerosene to electric. And I tell everybody, the only reason that that thing is standing is because they spent more time building the foundation than they did worrying about how quickly they could get it up. And at the end of the day, every single thing you do is touching a human being. And the foundation of that is a relationship. And so there is nothing without that relationship. You might think that your sales copy is going to convert them, but if they don't feel safe as a human, it will never work in the first place. And so it boils down to the relationship algorithm, which is about having a relationship with yourself, your team, and your customers informed in that order, built on authenticity and trust. And so that's my rant. Holy shit.
Dude, no, you're 100% spot on. And I see now why Brian introduced us and like, you guys need to know each other. Because so much, I mean, so much of what you're saying, right? At the end of the day, we all have the same end result, and that's death. And so what are you doing while you're alive to make an impact, not only for yourself, but for these other individuals? I decided a couple of years ago that it's not about my impact. It's about the impact I can help create for other people. And in turn, what has happened, my impact has grown because of that, right? The whole, who said the quote of like, help others get what they want, and you'll get what you want, or whatever.
It's a really old
Zig
person.
Ziglar.
Even
Zig Ziglar.
And Zig, it's been taken around because in the personal development I used to coach, we used to tell people, give away what you want to get, right? Everyone's like, well, I'm depressed. I'm like, well, what would make you happy? And they're like, somebody making me smile. We're like, well, go make somebody smile.
Yeah. And it'll,
right?
and
like,
100% it would happen too. Like, and that's how the world works. Right. And as we look at the impact we want to make, it's all about one person at a time, right? My podcast does very well. I'm very, very fortunate. Thousands of people from all over the world every single week tune into this thing. And it's really kind of this mind-blowing thought process. And I thought I was going to announce my event. This is something that's very interesting. I thought I was going to announce my event and I was going to sell out like that. That's what I thought was going to happen. I'm like, here it is, 2019. We're going to say it and everybody's going to buy it. 95% of the tickets sold to my event in 2019, I had to have a personal touch with those individuals. And it 100%. Taught me that it is 100% about nurturing those relationships. And it wasn't about selling the ticket. It was about, hey, I know if you come to this event, it's going to change your life. And that's what the conversation was about. And then they made a decision after that. But 95% of the people there, I had to have a one-on-one conversation with, and that's just the reality, man. But I want to ask you a question as we're getting closer to the end of this conversation, because by the way, you'll be back on. I know that we can keep talking.
I'm like, can we just do like a 10-part series and call it a day?
That's what we'll do. The whole last half of the year will be you. Every single episode.
I'll give everybody my model. I will talk all day. Like, here's my secret before you ask the question. If you haven't caught this yet, Justin's caught it. Brian knows. I give away all the information, all of it. Like, the people that pay me 6 figures for coaching, they listen to these and are like, damn it, you said that. I was like, yeah, but you pay me to hold you accountable to implement it with a personal touch. The information's the same. So listen, it's important. It's
always give away all the goods. And then all of a sudden, when you go and start coaching people and you say the same thing you said when it was free, they forgot you even said it. So just share it out, put it out there. And then there's
a very wise quote. I want you to ask this question, but this is applicable to what you just said. And it's dangerous if we ever do an event together, bro. We'll just sit up there and talk back and forth for like 8 hours.
Event over now. See ya.
I had a very wise shaman say to me, he said, a student says, I already know. And a master says, thanks for the reminder. And those are words that like I live by. Like I live by. And so it's always a really good barometer for a gauge on who I'm working with. You know, when they start to have it and see, and it helps me see where people are. But yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah, 100%, dude. I love that. I love that. So I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody, because I think it's a powerful question. It's a 2-part question. First part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
God, I love this. This is such a powerful question. And this is something that's been redefined by me literally thousands and thousands of times. So for me, it's really, really simple now. My definition of success is that when I put my head on the pillow at the night, that my bucket, my wife's bucket, my kids' bucket and my team's bucket is full.
Mm.
After that, I don't give a fuck. I don't care if sales happened. I don't care if blank, like I just lost my CEO due to some personal reasons, not professional. And I wouldn't even stop paying him. He went in and stopped paying himself. And I was like, I don't care.
Wow.
I don't care. I care that you're good, like as a person. And I take that from my military career because, you know, I hated being in the military. I hated it. It was hell. It was 13 years of torture. But was also beautiful is that every ounce of it was worth it with the relationships that I made and the depth of that relationship when we were connected under extreme circumstances that would normally crumble me. And it was in those moments now reflectively 15 years later that I see that the secret was always in the depth and the power of the relationship. Right. And it changes everything. And so for me, I just want to put my head on the pillow and be proud of the day that I had. So did I fill somebody's bucket? Did I give away what I had? And so that starts with, I have 4 sacred light keeper quadrants that I measure my success by. And those quadrants are the first thing I do every day is I pour into me, whether I feel like it or not. It's a stillness practice, a breath practice, a movement practice, and a learning practice. And I can always predict accurately the success of my day based on the depth of that practice. And that's how I measure it. And it goes easy because we can't pour into others until we pour from ourselves and pour into ourselves. And what I noticed is with entrepreneurs, and I coach literally hundreds of entrepreneurs, we get these temporary dopamine hits and false wins by neglecting ourselves and pouring that energy into other people. But yet it always leaves us feeling empty and more compensatory when it catches up. But the moment you're willing to trust yourself and lean in to you and realize that you can't create one positive result in the world unless you can create one with yourself. And you have the willingness to sit with that discomfort, those fears, those insecurities, that sadness, and you invest in that, everything's untouchable. And one of my favorite teachers, and he still coaches me to this day, I'll call him and be like, hey man, my marriage is on the rocks. I'm depressed. I lost this. I lost this. I lost this. And I feel like this. What do I do? And I love him for this. He responds, he says, sit with it longer. And I was like, no, what do I do? And he's like, sit with it longer. And he's like, and you sit with it until it's no longer there. And in that moment, you'll know what to do. And without fail, every single time. And so the way that I measure it is I measure it by checking my day to make sure that I'm intentionally giving myself the space to win, right? And it changes every day. I have 2 kids. My wife and I both travel. We own many companies. I'm traveling all over the world. And so it's not like this rigid, here's my morning routine, here's the time. It's this fluid, like, hey, I'm in a hotel. When I wake up, don't touch the phone, don't get up, lay in bed and do 20 minutes of stillness, stare at the ceiling, stare out the window, right? And I start to have this very fluid and integrous relationship with my practice. And so once I'm good there, then I go fill my team. And then I just ask myself, like, what are the 1 to 3 things that I can do today that moves me towards the vision? Whether it's record a podcast, jump on with you, hit a call, pay for the people's meal behind me at the restaurant because I heard them talking about money and they were the sweetest couple. And so I just paid for their meal like that. Like, I'm going to go to bed tonight. They don't know me. They'll never see me again. My son won't know. My wife won't know. I feel guilty even saying it right now. But when I put my head on the fucking pillow, I'm going to have a tear of gratitude that I grew up in poverty. And that this day today, rather than talking about the impact that I want to make, I just made the fucking impact.
I love that, man. I love that.
That's
dude.
it.
I mean, again, it's so funny. You said things in that I could go off on tangents forever. And I can see why, and I've already said this, but I can see why this makes sense. This connection, this friendship, all the things, man, because it's all about heart and it's all about giving first and understanding that at some point it'll come back to you. And I imagine growing up in poverty taught us this, which is weird because I grew up in a not so great space. Right. And so it's an interesting conversation that we can have the next time. We could also talk about all your businesses the next time too. It's not just the paleo blog.
Oh, bro, that thing is long gone. That thing is long gone. I gave that away. You probably know Josh Trent from Wellness Force.
Oh yeah, I know Josh. Yeah.
I gave it to Josh, bro.
That's so funny, dude.
Josh is who I gave it to. So Josh is running it and then they're still using it years and years later. And Josh and I are still really good friends. And so he's awesome. Who I gave it to because I asked myself, I said, I don't care about the numbers of the business. I was like, I have a really deep community. Who do I know that can love the community? And Josh was already running Wellness Force. that had a very similar audience. And so we handed it over, and in one day it was his.
Wow. That's wild, man. Though, and it's funny because I feel like we went from that to relationships, but there's many other businesses, profitable businesses that are all mixed in and intertwined. And
Oh, bro. I'm like, I literally have trouble keeping track of myself. Never mind. Like, it's funny how many people, well, what business you in? I'll start naming, and then a half an hour later, wait, I forgot one. Hold on. I forgot about, they called me yesterday. I had a board meeting, right? Like but like, if you ask me who I work with, I will name them by name, their wife's names, their kids' names. And it's funny because as a byproduct, I forget that some of them give me equity in their companies or put me on their board or pay me to do this. And so I love it, man. I love it. And you said something earlier about the thousands of people that listen to this. Podcasting is like my favorite thing to be a guest on. So for all of you listening, it like literally like warms my fucking heart to know that you're listening to this. Like, I appreciate you immensely. Like, it's a gift to me. So thank you.
I love it, man. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? Where do they find you? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah. So basically, here's what I think. At this point in the conversation, you're in one of two camps. This fucking dude is nuts. I want nothing to do with him. Great. Just keep listening to him. That's it. I just save you that. We'll do it. Justin's your man. Or you're like, I'm intrigued. Cool. I have a podcast. I have all those things, but none of them fucking matter to me. All I want you to do is send me a DM on Instagram. That's it. Personally, to me. I will respond with video. If you have a question, ask. You have feedback, ask. You have anything, ask. I want a relationship with you if you're interested in having one. I have a podcast. It's called The Mind of George Show, but I'll make it easier. I'll send you the link. Just send me a DM on Instagram. It's me. It's personal. I will respond with video. Anything you want. You're crazy. I love your bald hair. The pink background's dope. Can you expand on this? How do you know Justin? I don't care. You send it to me. I just want the connection. That's all I want selfishly. So my Instagram is It's George Bryant, and the It's is a part of it. So it's ITSGeorgeBryant, because an 86-year-old realtor in Michigan has georgebryant.com, and he gets way too many of my emails and gets upset, but he still won't give it to me. So it's George Bryant. That's what we got on Instagram. Send me a DM.
Love it, man. Like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Oh, I want to give the easy answer so bad, but I'm not going to. My absolute biggest moment of growth was the moment I decided to accept that nobody was going to do it for me. And that meant that I was willing to get uncomfortable. And I now have a directly correlated line of success parallel to how much time I'm willing to spend alone. And so the biggest moment for me was when I was willing to start investing in the relationship with myself. And what that means is no phone, no distractions, no nothing. Like me in nature, 8 hours. Me sitting on the couch, no TV, looking out the window for 2 hours. Me having feelings and asking myself what they are. Me taking myself on dates, to the movies, to dinner alone. No phone, no nothing. Just really learning how to coexist with the person I'm guaranteed to spend the rest of my life with. And so that would be the biggest one. I'd say the other ones are marrying my wife, having my son, losing a business, blah, blah, blah. But the deepest one for me was my willingness to walk into the shadows that scared me and explore what it would be like to have a deeply connected, integrous relationship with myself.
I love it, man. George, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with my audience. But more importantly, man, I'm excited for our friendship and see where it grows.
Bro, me too. I'm stoked.
This is great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm man. And everybody listening, thank you again. Have a beautiful day, and appreciate. Can't wait to hear from you.